Welcome to The Explainer. You know, when we typically think of the Weimar Republic's golden 20s, we usually picture this massive cultural boom, right? Modern art, economic revival, jazz. But beneath that dazzling surface hid some incredibly deep, explosive ideological fractures. As we're going to see today, the streets of the capital were telling a very, very different story.
Let's go back to August 11th, 1926. The democratic government orchestrated these massive, orderly crowds to celebrate Republic Day, or Verfassungstag, right in front of the Reichstag in Berlin. During the day, they projected exactly what any new democracy wants the world to see: unity, calm, and this unshakable institutional strength. It was a pristine, majestic illusion of order.
But man, that illusion was shattered almost immediately. Because that very night, once the grand parades wrapped up and the sun went down, brutal street clashes erupted in those exact same streets. 50 people were injured. 50! It was a violent reality check that completely destroyed the image of absolute peace the government had literally just tried to project a few hours earlier.
So, to understand how this single event foreshadowed a much darker shift in history, we're going to break this explainer down into four key areas: the Republic Day riots, Weimar's clashing ideologies, the false golden 20s, and finally, the prelude to total chaos.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the Republic Day riots and battling for the streets of Berlin.
During the daytime celebrations, well-dressed attendees and military bands gathered to celebrate the constitutional freedom established back in 1919. But to radical groups, this wasn't merely a parade. They viewed these events through a highly critical lens. For them, marching in Berlin was a physical, aggressive claim to the territory, and really, the political soul of the capital. The underlying logic was simple: if you control the streets, you control the nation's narrative.
Which brings us to part two, Weimar's clashing ideologies, specifically Republicans versus Communists.
We're looking at a tragic friction of totally irreconcilable visions here. On one side, you've got the Republicans. Politically, this coalition was made up of the Social Democratic Party, the Liberal German Democratic Party, and the Catholic Center Party. Their paramilitary wing, the Reichsbanner Schwarz-Rot-Gold, was fiercely dedicated to defending parliamentary democracy. To them, Republic Day was this absolutely crucial celebration of constitutional freedom. But on the complete opposite side, the Communists, led by the Communist Party of Germany and their paramilitary, the Red Front. To them, the Weimar Republic wasn't something to celebrate at all. They saw it as a bourgeois, capitalist failure that completely betrayed the true socialist revolution. Seeing this stark divide really perfectly explains why Republican groups marched to celebrate the Constitution, while communist factions routinely ambush them or organize these massive counter-demonstrations.
So we gotta ask, why did Constitution Day so deeply polarize society instead of bringing it together? Well, first off, there was an extreme lack of national consensus compared to the holidays we celebrate today. Right-wing nationalists completely ignored or aggressively protested the day. They viewed the Republic as a product of treason by the so-called November criminals. Meanwhile, this bitter left-wing split fueled intense hatred and violence. And like we talked about, marching wasn't just a parade. It was a literal physical claim to the capital. So rather than uniting the country, Republic Day alienated the right, who ignored it, and completely enraged the radical left, who saw it as an arrogant celebration of their own suppression.
Now, that communist rage had a very specific origin point: an unforgivable betrayal back in 1919. See, the far left harbored some deep, lingering resentment. Why? Because the SPD-led Republican government had previously used right-wing paramilitaries, the Freikorps, to violently crush communist uprisings in 1919. That historical wound, it was still wide open on the streets of Berlin.
Moving on to part three, the false golden 20s, or the deceptive calm of 1926.
Historians actually refer to this era as the Zwischenzeit, the stable interim period of the Weimar Republic during the mid-1920s. And honestly, on paper, things looked fantastic. Hyperinflation had finally been resolved, the economy was actively recovering, and Germany had just successfully signed the 1926 Treaty of Berlin with the Soviet Union.
But, as we know, there was a really stark divide between outward stability and hidden radicalism. While the rest of the world saw economic recovery, international treaties, and these grand daytime parades, the streets were experiencing a much, much darker reality. Uncontrollable, festering radicalism led to those nighttime riots we talked about, leaving dozens injured, and it required heavy-handed policing. The August 11 riots proved that underneath this beautifully stable surface, political violence was seriously brewing.
Because of all this festering radicalism, law enforcement was being pushed to its absolute limits.
Police forces like the Schutzpolizei and the Reichswehr were increasingly forced to use heavy-handed tactics just to manage public spaces, and this resulted in a dangerous militarization of civil policing. Tragically, relying on heavily armed police just to maintain daily order ultimately weakened public trust in democratic law itself.
Okay, let's hit our final section, Part 4, Prelude to Total Chaos and the Descent into the 1930s.
Things unraveled with terrifying speed. I mean, just 3 years after the Republic Day riots, the Blutmai, or Bloody May clashes of 1929 left over 30 civilians dead in Berlin. Then, by late 1929, the Great Depression hits, utterly exacerbating the national chaos. And as we move into the early 1930s, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, injected their own massive SA paramilitary right into the street fighting. This incredibly rapid escalation, from localized nighttime brawls straight to mass casualties and economic ruin, it completely paved the way for the total collapse of the Republic.
The political result of all this violence was just utterly devastating. The rapidly rising Nazi Party actually exploited the chaos to make a chilling argument. They claimed that parliamentary democracy was simply too weak to maintain basic law and order. They used the absolute failure of public safety in the streets to justify the eventual destruction of freedom.
So looking back at the grand illusions of August 1926, with these massive crowds projecting what was ultimately a doomed stability, we really see the profound, tragic irony of the era. Here was a democracy celebrating its constitution in the light of day, while quite literally fighting for its life in the dark.
It leaves us with a pretty chilling realization about the extreme fragility of public trust and political order. When the streets themselves become a battleground, can any democracy survive? Thank you for exploring this vital history with us in today's Explainer, and we really hope it inspires you to always look a little closer beneath the surface of the historical narrative.